The wind drifts gently through the alpine valleys, carrying the hush of distant bells, the whisper of snow against stone, and the soft breath of pine forests resting beneath moonlight. Tonight, as sleep begins to take hold, we journey into the foggy space between folklore and fear. If you're listening beneath drifting clouds or wrapped in the quiet of your room, feel free to share your setting in the comments. These stories take on new life when we hear where they're being dreamt. This is the tale of the Alp, a shadowed figure of European folklore, said to move through moonlit villages and high mountain passes, slipping unseen between the world of waking and the world of dreams. Settle in, breathe deep, and let your thoughts drift into the unknown. Welcome to Fairytales After Dark. High above the lowlands, where rivers are born from melting snow, the mountains stretch towards silent stars. Here, in the alpine regions of Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and the Tyrol, the land rises sharply, folding into ridges and valleys that gather mist like breath. The air is thinner, the nights quieter, and the darkness deeper. It is in these places, where the world feels both close and distant at once, that the legend of the Alp took shape. Villages clung to slopes, their roofs heavy with snow in winter, their windows glowing softly against the long dark. Stone paths wound between homes, leading down to frozen streams and narrow pastures. At dusk, the sound of cowbells drifted across the hills, slowly fading as animals were brought inside, fires lit and shutters drawn closed. Night did not arrive suddenly here. It descended, like fog sliding down a mountain face, quiet, gradual, unavoidable. And within that descent, stories stirred. The Alp was not said to dwell in forests, nor in caves, nor beneath the earth. It lived instead in the spaces between waking and sleeping, between thought and dream, between breath and stillness. It did not roam the countryside in search of prey. It drifted through villages, entering homes as softly as falling snow, seeking those already half lost to sleep. In the oldest accounts, the Alp appeared as a small, shadowed figure, its form thin, its movements light, almost weightless. Sometimes it resembled a hunched man, sometimes a twisted child, sometimes a black animal, or a shifting silhouette that refused clear shape. Its eyes were said to glimmer faintly, like distant stars caught behind cloud. Its presence was rarely seen, but it was often felt. Those visited by the Alp would awaken with a sense of crushing weight upon their chest, breath shallow, muscles frozen, voices trapped behind unmoving lips. The room would appear unchanged, fire dimmed, moonlight resting gently on walls, shadows unmoving. Yet something was wrong. A presence lingered, not violent, not aggressive, simply there, watching. People described the sensation as being pinned beneath invisible pressure, as though the night itself had leaned close, pressing softly, insistently. Thoughts slowed, panic fluttered, and then, gradually, the presence would fade, leaving only trembling breath and the lingering echo of something unseen. In the quiet villages of the Alps, these experiences were not dismissed, they were understood. The Alp had visited, to modern minds. Such episodes resemble sleep paralysis, a state in which the body remains motionless while the mind wakes. But folklore does not separate physiology from meaning. Instead, it weaves experience into story, giving shape to sensations that resist easy explanation. The Alp became that shape, a messenger from the threshold of dreams. In some tellings, the Alp rode upon the backs of sleeping animals, entering homes astride cats, or pigs, or goats, slipping down chimneys or through narrow cracks and shutters. In others, it melted through walls like mist or poured from the darkness beneath beds. No entrance was ever forced. The Alp did not break in. It arrived where sleep had already opened the door. Its name reflects this subtlety. Alp derives from ancient Germanic words associated with elves, spirits, and night-dwelling beings, creatures of twilight, neither wholly benevolent nor cruel. It belongs to the same unseen world as fair folk, as house spirits, as forest watchers, yet it moves closer to human vulnerability, closer to the breath, closer to the heart. Despite its unsettling visits, the Alp was rarely considered evil. It did not seek harm, it sought proximity. to press close against warmth, against breath, against living presence. Some believed it fed upon dreams. Others said it absorbed fear. Still others whispered that it simply longed for companionship, drawn irresistibly to the quiet rhythm of sleeping life, to ward it away. Villagers relied upon small rituals, a broom placed across the doorway, a pair of crossed knives beneath the pillow, a single shoe turned upside down beside the bed. Such objects did not threaten. They distracted. The Alp, it was said, was compelled to count, to inspect, to pause, and in that pause, dawn would come. These gestures reveal something tender within the tale. The Alp is not repelled by force. It is delayed by curiosity. This small detail preserves the fairy tale nature of the legend. It suggests a creature not driven by cruelty, but by strange instinct. A being compelled by rhythms and patterns beyond human logic. And in that strangeness, it becomes oddly gentle. Across generations, the story softened. Children were no longer frightened into obedience. They were soothed by understanding that the night sometimes pressed close, that dreams sometimes tangled, that fear could visit and pass, and that even shadow carried rules. The mountains taught patience, they taught humility, they taught that the world is vast and the human place within it is small. The Alp embodies these lessons, not as threat, but as reminder that consciousness itself is fragile, and sleep, a mysterious gift. Now, as your own breath slows, and the quiet deepens around you, imagine those alpine valleys once more, snow-laden rooftops, darkened windows, soft candlelight trembling behind shutters, the world settling, the night arriving, and somewhere within that settling, a shadow stirs, not to frighten but to witness. Long before science placed names upon sensation, long before sleep became something to be measured and explained, people learned to understand the night by listening to it. They listened to the slow settling of houses, to the faint crackle of dying embers, to the quiet sigh of wind slipping beneath doors. And within these sounds they heard stories forming. Sleep was never seen as empty. It was a crossing, a movement from one state of being into another, a slow surrender of the senses, a loosening of certainty, a drift toward unseen landscapes. The Alp became the guardian of this crossing, not to bar the way, but to walk beside it. In alpine folklore, dreams were thought to be places rather than thoughts, vast hidden valleys, moonlit forests, endless stairways carved from mist, and the Alp was said to wander these realms, moving easily through dream and waking alike, crossing thresholds without effort. This made it both feared and respected, for few beings were believed capable of such travel. Those who encountered the Alp did not describe pain, they described pressure, a weight upon the chest, a heaviness in the limbs, a sense of being held between worlds. The body remained motionless, while the mind floated, awake within its own stillness. And in that suspension, something ancient stirred. Some believed the Alp fed on breath, not stealing it, but sharing it, drawing close to feel its rhythm, to synchronize itself with the living world. In this way, the Alp became a mirror, reflecting the fragile balance between wakefulness and sleep. The Alps themselves reinforce this symbolism. Their peaks vanish into cloud, their valleys disappear into shadow, their paths twist and fade, only to reappear elsewhere. Nothing is direct, nothing is fully seen. Everything suggests continuation beyond sight. And so, the land itself teaches dream. Snow transforms sound. Footsteps vanish, voices soften, movement becomes suggestion. The world grows hushed, and within that hush, consciousness begins to drift. It is no wonder the Alp found its home here, in winter. Nights stretch long across the mountains, darkness arrives early and leaves late. Families gathered close, sharing warmth, sharing stories, allowing time itself to slow. The Alp entered these nights gently, not as intruder, but as companion, a reminder that even in rest, something watches. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. Over time, people began to speak of the Alp as less a creature and more a presence, not a being, but a state, a sensation given shape, the feeling of sinking into sleep, while part of the mind still resists. The strange floating awareness between thought and dream. This is the Alp. In this understanding, The legend becomes deeply tender. The Alp no longer arrives to frighten, it arrives to guide, to ease the final resistance of waking consciousness, to usher the sleeper fully into rest. The small rituals used to ward it away reflect this gentleness. A broom across the threshold, a shoe overturned beside the bed, a crossed blade beneath the pillow. Not weapons, not barriers, but puzzles, distractions, small tasks to occupy a wandering mind. In this way, the rituals mirror modern techniques for calming anxiety, counting breath, following rhythm, fixing attention gently. The folklore understood something profound, that the mind needs softness, not force, to release itself. The Alp embodies this softness, even in its unsettling form. Some stories describe the Alp as wearing a hat, a pointed cap pulled low over its eyes. This small detail transforms it instantly, from monster to trickster, from terror to whimsy. For hats may be removed, and in some tales, if a person manages to steal the Alp's cap, the creature loses its power. It becomes confused, disoriented, unable to find its way back into shadow. This echoes ancient beliefs that identity and magic were bound to clothing, to symbols, to outward forms. It suggests that the Alp's power is not absolute. It is conditional, dependent on belief. This gentle vulnerability further softens the legend. It allows the listener to feel curiosity instead of fear, wonder instead of alarm. Across Europe, similar figures appear. The Mara, the Nachtmar, the Pisadera, all manifestations of sleep-bound presence, all expressions of the human struggle between surrender and control. These stories differ in shape, but share essence. They remind us that consciousness is not fixed, that the border between waking and dreaming is thin, and that crossing it can feel strange. In this light, the Alp becomes a teacher. It shows us what it means to let go, to trust the dark, to allow the mind to dissolve its rigid edges. Now, as your breathing slows and the world around you grows quieter, that lesson begins to unfold. Thoughts soften, images blur, the pull of wakefulness weakens. And the night draws closer. The mountains fade into shadow, the valleys sink into mist. Even the stars dim, as clouds drift across their distant glow. Everything slows. This is where the Alp moves most freely, not as a figure, but as a feeling, a presence in the breath, a weight in the stillness, a softness in the dark. And in that softness, sleep begins its quiet work. As the night deepens, the mountains begin to soften, their sharp edges blur. Their towering forms dissolve into silhouette, and the vast slopes that once loomed in moonlight settle quietly into shadow. The wind slows, the valleys grow still, and the world exhales. This is the hour when even stone seems to rest. Snow drifts lazily across darkened ridges, each flake descending without urgency, without destination, touching earth, then vanishing. The forest stands silent beneath their pale covering, branches bowed gently, needles dusted with frost, roots anchored deep within frozen soil. Nothing stirs, nothing calls, everything listens. In this quiet, the villages below fade from awareness, windows darken, chimneys cool, footsteps vanish. Even the faint sound of distant bells dissolves into memory. Only the mountains remain, ancient, patient, unmoved. This is where the Alp releases its hold, not retreating, not fleeing, but dissolving gently back into the fabric of sleep. It no longer presses close, no longer lingers near the breath, no longer hovers at the edge of thought. It becomes stillness. The boundary between waking and dreaming thins. Thoughts drift without direction. Images soften. Memory loosens its shape. The mind opens, and then, slowly, begins to empty. This is not loss. It is relief. The gentle surrender of awareness, the easing of effort, the quiet permission to rest. The mountains understand this surrender. They do not resist the passing of seasons. They welcome snow, they endure thaw, they accept erosion, and in doing so they persist. Their stillness teaches patience, their silence teaches peace. As you rest now, let that lesson unfold. There's no need to hurry, no need to plan, no need to remember. Only breath remains, slow, even, gentle. Somewhere high above, clouds drift across the moon, their shadows gliding softly along distant slopes. Stars fade and return. The night deepens. The Alp is no longer a figure, it is a feeling. A calm pressure, a steady presence, a quiet reassurance that the world continues, even as consciousness fades, and within that continuation, there is safety, there is belonging, there is rest. Nothing waits beyond this moment, nothing calls, nothing asks, only the vast hush of alpine night, carrying thought gently downward. Settle in, breathe deep, and let your thoughts drift into the unknown. This has been Fairy Tales After Dark.